In response to mob persecutions in Missouri, in the early spring of 1834, Joseph Smith and others began collecting donations and recruiting volunteers to go to the relief of the saints in Missouri. On April 21st, Hyrum Smith and Lyman White left Kirtland for Michigan to recruit volunteers. On May 1st, the Camp of Israel was officially called to arms, and over 20 men left Kirtland, traveling south to camp in New Portage, where they would await the rest of the company. On May 5th, Joseph left with another 80 men and joined them in New Portage. On the same day, Hyrum left Pontiac, Michigan with a dozen men. The two divisions planned to join together in Missouri along the Salt River. Joseph reached New Portage on the 7th and spent the day organizing the camp into companies. And this was the preparations made for what would later be called Zion's Camp. In this video, part 2 in my series, I will talk about their travels through the state of Ohio and Indiana. Also, we will see how far Hyrum's division travels in the same span of time. So let us talk about first stage 1, traveling through Ohio. As I said, they organize the camp on the 7th. They leave New Portage on the 8th with over 100 men. The 20 that left on the 1st plus the 80 that had left on the 5th. And on the 7th and on the 8th, new men joined them. Men would continue to join the camp throughout its travels. Not large bodies, but a couple, 3 or 4 here or there, would continuously join the camp. In this early stage in Ohio, as with really the rest of the travels, they tried to travel on the main road as much as possible, but due to their enemies as well as the direction that they were traveling, they often had to cut through some poorly kept trails and sometimes through the wilderness with no trails to follow. This meant trudging through mud, sometimes ankle deep, sometimes knee deep, and often the horses were not sufficiently strong to pull the wagons through the mud because they were sinking into the mud themselves. And so the saints would lash ropes to the wagons, and they would walk on the edges of the road where the mud was not quite as deep and pull the wagons along the road. This led to other complications such as damage to the wheels as well as the harnesses. And in this early stages, 8th, 9th, maybe the 10th of May, one wagon, the harnesses broke so that the horses were no longer attached. And the men had to drag the wagon 3 miles until it was out of the mud before they could effect repairs. During this time, Parley P. Pratt rode on the wagon, whistling encouragement to the men. This was just the common trials of the journey. Now, this was a regular military camp. Its purpose was a military purpose, and it was run with regular military order and command. This is demonstrated on the 15th, including the posting of guards every night to keep watch for enemies, because the church at this time, the saints had many enemies both in Ohio and in Missouri. And the regular military nature of this camp is demonstrated in the story of one Moses Martin. He is set on watch on the 15th of May and falls asleep. Joseph Smith finds him sleeping on guard. He does not wake him, he simply takes his sword as proof that he was asleep. He is then court-martialed 2 days later on the 17th, where he makes a full confession, begging mercy in the fact that he was simply exhausted. Joseph Smith, as commander-in-chief, pardons him. And this is because this is very early on, and most of these men are not regular soldiers. They don't understand the military discipline that is going to be needed during this expedition. And so he pardons him for this early infraction, but with a warning to not let it happen again. And not just warning to Moses, but a warning to all the camp, that they need to be vigilant, they need to be on watch. When they are assigned their duties, they need to fulfill them. It is also in this early period in Ohio that we first see Joseph Smith's prophetic gift exercised in this expedition, as well as the gifts of faith. For remember, in the New Testament, Christ states that the signs that follow the faithful will include that they drink or eat what is poisonous, and it has no effect on them. And we see this on the 16th of May. They are passing through an area in Ohio, and they get word that there is milk sickness in the area. Now, milk sickness was a very deadly disease at the time, and it was caused by cows and other cattle too, but primarily cows, eating what was called white snake root. And this was poisonous. It would poison the cows at times as well, but often it would simply pass through the cows and into the milk. And so any milk, cheese, or other dairy products made with the milk of that cow would be poisonous. And the saints became fearful of buying any milk in the area. See, they weren't traveling with full provisions. They were expecting to purchase food and other necessities along the way. And they get into the area, they need to buy some milk. But there is milk sickness, and they are scared to buy anything, especially with the idea that they know that their enemies are out there. And they are worried that their enemies may purposely sell them sick milk. And they come to Joseph Smith with this concern. And Joseph Smith simply tells them, buy all the milk you can. Doesn't matter if it's from a friend or an enemy, just don't ask if it is sick. You buy the milk with the assumption that it is good. And as long as you don't ask, you just buy the milk, nobody will be sick. Nobody will be affected by it. And so they went out and they bought all the milk they could. They had some good meals, and nobody was sick, even though all the people in the surrounding area, every family was affected by this milk sickness at the time. It was going through the entire area. Everybody was affected. But Zion's camp was unaffected because they had faith. They believed in God's promises, and they trusted in their prophet. Now, on the 17th of May, they crossed the state border into the state of Indiana. And so old Moses Martin, he fell asleep on duty in Ohio, but his court martial is held in Indiana. But the next day is the Sabbath. So they cross over on the 17th and they make camp ready for the Sabbath. But there is a spirit of contention and rebellion in the camp, primarily coming from Sylvester Smith. No direct relation to Joseph. Sylvester is the complainer-in-chief. Most troubles, most contentions that arise in the camp come from Sylvester. Now, at this time, Joseph does not tell us the particulars of this contention. He said there is a contention arises between Sylvester and another man, and he is called in to settle the dispute. And after speaking with the men and settling the dispute, he warns the camp that if they are not united, if this spirit of contention continues, they will be judged. They will feel the judgment of God. But if they will humble themselves, then they will be protected. The next morning, on the 18th of May, the first morning in Indiana, when they wake up, all the horses are foundered. Now, what foundered is, this is a colloquial term for a disease known as laminitis. And that is an infection and inflammation of the soft tissue between the hoof and the leg bone. When it gets so swollen that it is visibly noticeable to the naked eye, it is referred to as being foundered. Now, this means the horse has a hard time walking, if it can stand at all. And in its most severe stages, it results in the leg bone actually pushing through the hoof. So they wake up and every single horse is foundered. They can't lead them even a couple of feet to the water to get drink. And Joseph Smith tells the camp, this is what I was warning you about. This is the result of your contentions. God is warning you. The judgments of God will come. And he promises them, if you will humble yourselves, if you will turn to God, if you will turn away from your contentions, then by noon, everything will be fine. And the camp, to a man, with one exception, humbles themselves, and all the horses by noon are just as sprightly as ever, scampering about. The one exception is Sylvester Smith, whose horse dies from this infection. Now, it's only one of his horses. I think he has 3 horses here, a full team of horses. So one of his horses dies because of this disease, and he is the one man who is most contentious and does not want to humble himself before the Lord. Now, this is when they spend their first Sabbath in Indiana. They have just crossed over Indiana on the 17th, and they have the Sabbath on the 18th. Hyrum's division is now crossing into Indiana. They have passed through Michigan and through the corner of Indiana, and they are actually on the 17th, they camp in Indiana on the state border, and they wait the Sabbath, and then they cross into Illinois on the 19th. In addition, it is about this time that the saints in Clay County, Missouri, establish an armory where they are able to manufacture as well as repair various weapons, knives, bayonets, flintlock guns, that kind of thing. So they are building their own weaponry, once again, because all their weapons were confiscated by the mob. So they are rebuilding their weapons so that when they are escorted back into Jackson County, they will have the means of defending themselves. Now, this is the end of stage 1 of our journey. Now we move into stage 2, and this will be crossing the state of Indiana. Now, it doesn't take too long to cross Indiana, but some significant things happen here. Primarily, the attempts of spies from Missouri to infiltrate the camp and learn what they are doing and who is there, particularly trying to identify Joseph Smith. So on the 16th, as they were passing through Dayton, Ohio, some men had come out from the city to inquire about what was going on, asking where they were from and where they were going. And the answer that they got was, "We are from the east and we are going west." And when these men returned to Dayton, they reported that the camp was over 600 men, which at this time I think it was about 140. Now we are in Indiana, and the spies of the mob are becoming more frequent. On the 20th, as we are going through Indiana, 3 men approach the camp and begin questioning various members. Where are you from? Well, the answers vary. Some from Maine, some from Ohio, some from New York, some from Massachusetts, all these varying places. And ask where they're going. We're going west. Same answers as before. So they then approach Dr. Frederick G. Williams, member of the First Presidency, a great man, and they ask him. And this is what Joseph Smith records. They then addressed themselves to Dr. Frederick G. Williams to see if they could find out who the leader of the camp was. The doctor replied, "We have no one in particular." They asked if we had not a general to take the lead of the company. The reply was, "No one in particular." "But," said they, "is there not someone among you whom you call your captain or leader, or who is superior to the rest?" He answered, "Sometimes one and sometimes another takes charge of the company, so as not to throw the burden upon anyone in particular." These spies who had come from the west passed us several times that day and the next. I love this exchange with Frederick G. Williams. They're trying to find out who Joseph Smith is. They're trying to figure out, point to him in the crowd is what they're doing. They're trying to identify him. Because it is in their mind that if they can kill Joseph Smith, everything else will disband, everything else will break up. But the people, the saints, are protecting Joseph. And who takes the lead? No one in particular. Sometimes one, sometimes another. We spread the burden of leadership out. I just love that exchange. But it also says that the spies followed them. They crossed their trail several times, both that day, both the 20th and the 21st. The spies of Missouri are out trying to find out if this is the camp that is traveling to Missouri, because the saints in Missouri had informed Governor Dunklin that their brethren in the east were forming a company to come and assist them in maintaining their property. And the mobs are actually scared of an army marching out to oppose them. So they're sending their spies out to find out who they are and find out who Joseph Smith is, to identify Joseph. Now, along with the spies come many threats. As they are coming to the city of Indianapolis, many spies come out and threaten them, say they will never get through the city. And if they go through in a large body, they may have been hindered, but they are smart. And Joseph Smith tells them, when we come to Indianapolis, don't go through as a main body. Take a wagon through. Take a group, 5 or 6 men at a time. Go into the city by different roads and leave the city by different roads. And in this way, they pass through without any hindrance. The people in Indianapolis are all looking out for this great company of Mormons that are going to be marching through their city. And it never happens. And the people are all wondering what these rumors were. There was later, on the 25th, the next Sabbath. This is just after they cross into the state of Illinois. As they are camped for the Sabbath, another spy from Missouri comes into the camp and starts talking to the people. Joseph Smith recognizes him, because remember, Joseph Smith was in Independence a couple of years earlier. And so he recognizes the man as being from Independence. And The saints give no information, and the man gets very frustrated. He eventually leaves, but not before he threatens that the saints will never cross the Mississippi River. But we will see that they cross that river without incident, without any trouble. And all the threats of all the threats of the spies and the mobs, all come to nothing. They are all meaningless, and the camp continues on. But they still have their trials. Even in Indiana, they are trudging through the mud, and they often have little to no food. They try to get flour to make bread, but often they have to make only cornbread because that's the only kind of flour they can get. Sometimes they eat only this cornbread, possibly with some milk if they can get their hold of it, but otherwise with water. They are often hungry, they are often thirsty. Finding fresh water in the wilderness is not as easy as some might think. But it was on the 24th that they crossed into Illinois, and on the 25th, the spy comes in. And this is how things are going now. They are on the alert for the rest of the journey because these spies are near constant at this point. But now let us look at the travels of Hyrum and his division as they move through Illinois. Remember, they camped in Indiana on the 17th and 18th for the Sabbath. On the 19th, they cross into Illinois. On the 20th, they wake up, and early that morning, their horses all bolt. And they describe, they chase the horses would run 3 or 4 miles, and then they'd stop in the prairie, and the men would chase them down. But as soon as the men got within maybe half a mile of the horses would spook again and run. And they spent most of the day chasing the horses down. They finally catch them, they get back on their journey. Now, this route of the journey is known to Hyrum and Lyman White because they both served missions here when they were traveling out to independence back in 1831, maybe 32. So they are somewhat familiar with the trails and the landmarks. But this is also spring, and so we have the mud and everything. And it's a very miry land. It's not even just mud, but very miry land because there is a limestone deposit just a few feet below the surface. And so all the topsoil is getting soaked from the snow melt from winter as well as the rain, and it just creates a very slimy, miry terrain that they are traveling through. They do find a number of landmarks on the way to verify that they are on the right path, and they do have some trails that they are able to follow, but for a certain portion of it they do have to go straight across the prairie and cut their own paths. Eventually, on the 24th, they arrive in the area of Pleasant Grove, and here they meet a few members of the church, and they are welcomed in by the Pleasant Grove branch for the 25th Sabbath meeting. And so they are given some relief from their trials on the trail for this day and spend a good Sabbath with the saints in Pleasant Grove. But that is where we're going to leave the journey here for this video. Joseph Smith's division has just crossed into Illinois. They are right on the border, and they are dealing with many spies as well as the trials of traveling in the wilderness, including sickness of both the men and the horses and contentions within the camp. All of it taking its toll on the men as they travel to the relief of the saints in Missouri. I'm going to leave this one here, and we pick it up in our next video. We will look at their travels through the state of Illinois and Missouri until they get out to the west where the saints are waiting in Clay County for their relief. That will be part 3 of this series on Zion's Camp.